Hi, bonjour tout le monde. Hi, salam alaikum. J'espère que tout le monde va bien. I hope that everybody is well. It's been a while. It's been a while, my people. It's been a while since I've been on Ayeeyo Podcast. Welcome to the new listeners. Bienvenue aux nouvelles personnes sur Ayeeyo Podcast. Je me présente. Mon nom est Edil. As simple as that. Mon nom est Edil et c'est le 4e épisode de Ayeeyo Podcast. Ayeeyo Podcast est un podcast multilingue, bilingue, multilingue, comme vous voulez. Vraiment, on navigue, we navigate in different languages. We're not stuck in the two colonial languages. As a Black African person, you know, I embrace all languages. I think languages are beautiful. And so this podcast is navigates, it flows with the languages, and it respects the diversity of all the languages that are out there. Somali, Wolof, Swahili, English, French. Yes, indeed. This episode will be in English, and so I'll stick to English for this episode. It's been a while, people. It's been a while since I had mind space, you know, just time to record. And am I sorry that it took me a few months to come and record that 4th episode? No, I am not sorry. I am not, because I had to go take care of myself. I had to slow down. And I think as a Black woman, it's very important to prioritize, you know, ourselves, our beautiful self. That's what I had to do in the past few months. I had to prioritize myself, my time, my energy, be with myself, be with people who love me, care for me, and just to be still and not do much. And so I had to push back the recording of this 4th episode that is a very important episode that will talk about my journey as a Black woman professional. And I have to say that running this podcast is a journey. I'm learning as I'm recording this. My people, this is how much I care for you. This is how much I love you. I got new equipment to record this 4th episode after getting comments about how you appreciated the episodes, but that I had to work on the sound. Because I listen to my communities, because I do listen, I did the work and I shopped around a bit for equipment. And this podcast, Ayeeyo Podcast, is like, I'm learning through the process of putting in place this podcast. Every single episode will be better because it's a learning process for me, for the communities that are listening, and for the people who are supporting me with the production of this podcast. As I've said in, you know, the 3 other episodes that I really invite you to explore, this podcast is not made to be perfect in no kind of way. It's this podcast is a testimony regarding the fact that you can create things that are not perfect and still move. So if it's inspiring you in that way, I am very, very, very happy. Very happy. So for this 4th episode, let's get into it. Within a few minutes, I will try to talk about my journey as a Black woman professional. That is a long one, and we're talking 15 years plus, doing different things, including being in business, and also working in the nonprofit world, and working in government, and working in research centers and the private sector. Like, I will really, the biggest challenge for this episode will be to give you just a rundown of my experiences as a Black woman that has traveled the world, that has studied on many continents, and that has given almost 15 years of her life working within mostly Black communities. And so I will try. I will try. It's a lot. There's so much I want to say, but obviously in one episode, this won't last 3 hours. I promise you. I promise you. Nothing against the podcast. Like, I know a few podcasts out there. They have episodes that are like 2, 3, 4 hours long. No, this is not the situation for Ayeeyo Podcast. It's not. It's not. I will try to. I will try to sum it up, but I'll also try to make it comfortable because being a Black woman in the workforce, in the workplace, in business, doing different things, is something that is, we Black women are extremely fierce and beautiful and amazing beings. Let's start with that. But the reality of things, as a sociologist that has a full-blown understanding of the data and the statistics and the realities that are affecting Black women, I know that there's a lot of, sadly, disrespect, belittling of Black women in the workforce. There's a lot of lack of recognition, lack of understanding of the full-blown experience of the brilliance of Black women who have skills, who speak many languages, who have much to bring to the world. But does the world want to receive? That's the real question. That's the real question. Now, let's start with the beginning. I'll start with the beginning. And I think the beginning for me is speaking loudly to the journey. I was born in Djibouti, East Africa, a little country right next to Ethiopia, and I'm the child of a beautiful teacher. My mother is a teacher, and so at home, while growing up in unceded land Montreal, I grew up in a home with a mother that is a teacher, that was a teacher, and that will die a teacher, and that had education as a very big core value. I have to say, she was pretty obsessed with education in school. And I grew up in a home where just the understanding of knowledge was very, very, very important. And so it was not more about getting the degrees, but it was about you not sitting in a place where you think you know everything. And so my mother as a teacher, she always pushed us, always told me, her only daughter, that she expected much from me and that she saw me as the most beautiful being and the most just intelligent being. And so I grew up in a home where much was expected of me because people thought I really could bring much to the world. And so having that in my heart, I was pushing, as a teenager, as a young adult, I was pushing. For the people wondering how old I am, I'm 38 years old. I'm proudly 38 years old. And so when I say that I have 15 years of experience, it's like we're talking 15 years. Like it's 15 years of work. So that said, in that environment growing up, what was clear is that thinking was important. The freedom in you being able to use your brain and think for yourself was very important. And the first contract I ever signed in the nonprofit world, I signed it in 2009, and so almost 15 years ago, in a nonprofit organization in Little Burgundy. For the people who don't know the neighborhood, called Little Burgundy in unceded land Montreal. Little Burgundy is a very historically Black neighborhood. Lots of Caribbean, English-speaking, beautiful people. I grew up, my East African self, I grew up with lots of Black people who speak English in Quebec. And they have shown me the way when it comes to community work, community service. And so in 2009, almost 15 years ago, my professional life, I don't like to use the word career because it really doesn't sit well with me. But I would say my professional journey started in the nonprofit world. In 2009, I was working in a nonprofit organization within my neighborhood, the neighborhood I grew up in that was very, 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 very grassroots when it comes to embodying community values. And so growing up there and ending up, at a very young age, just engaging in community with people who were different. Like we were Black people engaging with each other, but we were truly different because, racism wants us to think that all Black people are the same. We different, but we're beautifully, beautifully, beautifully different. And so almost 15 years ago, I engaged in community in the most organic way possible. And I learned. I learned through the nonprofit world throughout the years, working in feminist organizations, working in organizations that had a big focus on the youth and families. And I, as I said, my mother is in education. And so university was a big question. I doubted, when I finished college, what we call in Quebec CEGEP, I doubted. I was like, why? I don't know if I want to go to university. And so I took a few years off after college and I traveled. I traveled the world and I did different things. And I can say that the blueprint really at the beginning of my 20s when I started to work was, the blueprint, what really, 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 I would say, groomed me as a professional was the fact that at 21, 22 years old, I had my own business. Yes, indeed. I had my own business while engaging in community and doing that beautiful work in the nonprofit world. I also had a business. Lots of people don't know that about me. They know that I'm trained as a sociologist, that I, studied at Université de Montréal, and that I did a lot of work in research, nonprofit, and government work. But lots of people don't know that I'm a fully trained makeup artist. And so as I was doing that nonprofit work that was very, very dear to my heart, I also created a business. And I also, I was trained by a few makeup artists who were working at Cirque du Soleil. Cirque du Soleil, very known institution here in Quebec and all around the world. And I was trained by people who knew a lot about the art of makeup. And after being fully trained, I created this business. And this business really gave me the taste of what freedom means professionally and what creating respectful spaces for people means and what working as a freelancer means. And so when you work as an employee and when you work as a person that created a business, the energy is, I would say, is very different. We need employees in the world, like people who create businesses and organizations, they need employees. But the fact that at a very young age, at the beginning of my 20s, I tasted the freedom of having a business, of managing relationships with clients, the fact that I literally created wealth by my own self. The energy of me as a professional was it has always been for the past 15 years an energy that had to do with freedom and had to do with being capable of delivering, but also wanting to be completely free. While doing it, while, wanting to be fully respected while doing it. And I have to say that the energy of being an employee had me wondering, if the institutions could take in the brilliance of all the Black women around me, including myself. And I had the privilege of, living in both worlds, meaning the business world and also the employee, nonprofit, government world. And I saw the energy that was completely different. And I was, with the time and with the years, profoundly grateful that I was introduced to business, because even though the world of business is sometimes, I have to say, the culture within the business world is sometimes very shark-like. It's like in terms of prevention and how business people can navigate sometimes. As a person that was very sensitive to certain values coming from the nonprofit world, I wasn't always comfortable with the circles in business, but I came to realize that I could do both. I could hold the nonprofit values, or at least the values that were instilled in me as a child. Coming from a mother that was very big on sharing, caring, and taking. Just recognizing that humans are humans, and that we have to take care of one another. I didn't learn that in the nonprofit world. Not at all, actually, not at all. I learned that within my family, and with the relationship I had with my mother. And I have to say, doing that community work when at the beginning of my 20s, I was so into the work. I was so into the understanding of, how do we fix problems? How do we ease things for marginalized communities, that at some point, after opening the studio and having my own business, and becoming a makeup artist, and also finishing college, and then reflecting on, do I want to go to university? The full story is that I was so involved within my communities in Little Burgundy that I ended up having a scholarship, a full-blown scholarship, not necessarily for my grades, but for my community involvement. And so the work that I have put in within my communities, was seen, acknowledged by people. And people saw the young self that I was, after college. They saw me working and doing different things with the youth. And there's somebody that stopped me. And that somebody told me, hey, you look like you would want to learn even more and do even more. Like, there's this scholarship. And they're not looking at your grades. They're looking at the amount of time and energy you gave to your communities. Would you be interested in applying? And so myself, I was like, what? A full scholarship? Like, you want to pay for my education? Because for me, as a young Black woman that grew up in a home where my mother wanted me to go to university, but the kind of like thing that we couldn't really talk about was that she didn't have the means to pay for my education. And I wasn't seeing, as a young person, how was I going to end up in university if I have to pay, a couple of thousands of dollars a year to go to university? I wasn't seeing it for myself. I knew I could, but I wasn't seeing it at all for myself. And so life happens. Life happened. La vie est arrivée. And I was offered the scholarship for my community involvement. And so I benefited from that scholarship, ended up going to Université de Montréal en français. And I studied sociology and international development, what we call coopération internationale en français, sociologie. And once in university, many years in a row, I benefited from that full-blown scholarship because of my community involvement. And once I got to university as a young person, young Black soul, brilliant Black soul, I when I got to college, actually, I have to say, when I got to college, I realized that Quebec, the province of Quebec, was mostly white, you know? And this was a shocker to me. Truly. This was a big, big, big shocker to me because growing up in Little Burgundy, being in certain circles, being taken care, I was being taken care of, how do you say that in English? On prenait soin de moi. The people who were taking care of me were mostly Black people. The people who were around me were mostly racialized people. White people were, in my world, until I was 20 years old, the minority. They were the minority. And so when I got to college and when I got to university, for the first time in my life, I was like, wow, it's a lot of white people in Quebec. And there was a culture shock for me in terms of more than 15 years ago when I ended up in these circles, university circles, college, whatever, whatnot. I just realized that, you know, there's truly 3% of Black people in Quebec, and it shows. And that wasn't my world. That wasn't my reality until, you know, I got to college and until I got to university. And so, yeah, I just took note of that. I'm like, okay, lots of white people in Quebec, lots of white, take note. And at the end, I ended up studying in Paris as well, at La Sorbonne. La Sorbonne, for the people studying in French in the university circles, La Sorbonne is known to be a university that has trained for many centuries, many decades, sociologists, you know, and it's a very, very colonial university. It's a white French university. And when I was there in France, in Paris, I remember, you know, there was not a lot of Black people in the classroom when I was presenting, because being a sociologist has much to do with speaking publicly, has much to do with, you know, data management, data analysis, understanding the world and its realities. When I was there in France, just like in Quebec, I was like, wow, it's a lot of white people at La Sorbonne. It's a lot of white people. But I was trained there. I did the thing, you know, and I was really good. I was actually really, 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 really good at it. And I moved, you know, I graduated. I traveled the world, made my mother proud. I know that when I ended up at La Sorbonne, you know, my mother told her sisters, you know, she told everybody. And they were very, very proud of me. And while I was navigating that journey, as a young Black woman, it was challenging. It was challenging to be in these spaces and to 98% of the time be the only Black woman, the only Black African woman in these spaces. And I, you know, as I was being celebrated, maybe, you know, by different people around me, because when you achieve things, people celebrate you. But as a Black woman, I learned to also be with myself and understand how it feels to be in these spaces and how comfortable, you know, was I in these spaces, even though I was excelling, even though I was thriving, even though, you know, I was doing the thing, how was I feeling? And the way I felt was, you know, the most important thing for me. When I enter institutions, when I enter different organizations, when I do what I do, you know, might be in government, might be in a nonprofit world, might be collaborating as a consultant, you know, dealing with research centers, different, like employee, consultant, business person. At the end of the day, how am I feeling? And in that journey, I had to ask myself, like, how am I feeling doing all of these things? And I really, 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 really did not care for the perception of things. I did not care about, you know, what people thought about me in terms of, you know, me being a Black African, multilingual professional, having organizations contact me to work with them, not for them, with them. I don't work for people. I work with people. And the culture, sadly, in most institutions has to do with people want you to work for them. And the minute you make them understand that you want to work with them and not for them, they're clearly not happy, especially when it comes from a Black woman. And I have to say, after opening that studio as a fully trained makeup artist, after getting the scholarship for my community involvement, after traveling the world and studying in Europe and then North America, and just traveling and doing these different things as a person that wanted everything. I wanted everything. For me, it came down to how I felt. It came down to how I felt while doing all of these things. And did I feel respected? Did I feel cared for? Did I engage with people who cared for my breath? Did I engage with people who were seeing all of me, not just my degrees, not just what I could do for them, not just what I represented on paper? I really cared about how people were treating me. On the one-on-one, engaging with different professionals. I really care for how people had kindness, as a culture, as a professional culture. I cared for that. And I realized that it wasn't a priority. It was not a priority for the institutions to be kind. Most of the institutions I engaged with had a hard time just being kind. And being kind is also rooted in management. It's fully rooted in management. Kindness. I'm sorry for the noise. There's lots of noise. Very sorry about that. But all that to say, kindness. I felt like it was challenging for me to navigate and just be respected, no matter my title, because in 2022 I ended up with my first director position, and at the end I reflected. I was like, okay, so how does this feel again? How does this feel? And as a Black woman, I ended up, and this is really truly my experience, my understanding, but as a sociologist, I cannot not see and acknowledge the statistics that are affecting Black women when it comes to their evolution professionally, the salary, the way people are not willing to negotiate with Black women who have skills, who really speak many languages and are capable of doing many things. The way that Black women are treated, these statistics are mirroring the treatment. And we don't like to talk about that because we live in a society where, it's all bubbly. We want to feel good. We want the message that's going to give us the little boost and be like, it's so great. It's so great. But the thing is, we have to do better. And the statistics are showing very clearly that the institutions have to do better. The boards have to do better. Leadership, they have to do better. Because the statistics are clear, very, 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 very clear. And in the professional world, it's very taboo. It's very taboo to say, hey, I just had that experience and it was very violent and it was very, 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 very harmful. And, I had to mentally recover from that experience. And this is how these people treated me. And it's very taboo to say it out loud. You know, it's very taboo to really be real about the power dynamics that are going on in the institutions, about the anti-Black racism, the patriarchy, the transphobia, the homophobia, all of the xenophobia that happens and that affects, heavily trans Black women. Heavily, And at the end, after, doing all of that studying, all of that traveling, meeting people from all around the world, being capable of doing it in different languages, I came to realize that, success means different things. Like it means different things for different people, right? And for me, success ended up being, a businesswoman. And the work that I've put in the nonprofit sector, the work that I've put in, collaborating with all types of people, I realized that the thing that empowered me the most in my entire journey as a professional was when I was creating in the context of freelancing, in the context of being a consultant, in the context of being a business person. And I realized that, at the end of the day, as a Black woman, where I felt the most comfortable, where I felt mostly respected and seen, it was happening in the spaces that I created for myself. And so as a person that is a consultant, I choose the people. I specifically choose the people I want to work with. I create the culture with them. As an employee, it was not very much possible to create culture within the institutions. As a Black woman, my input, my recommendations, what I had to say, it was challenging, and I'm using the word challenging to not, use another word that would bring us really down. But truly, as a freelancer, as a consultant, as a person that was fully responsible to create respectful spaces and to collaborate with people with all due respect for what they have to bring to the table. It's really as a person, as a freelancer, as a consultant, and as a business person that I was capable of respecting myself and creating spaces that looked like me and that moved in a way that was honoring me, my soul, my person, as a Black woman. Now, at this point, am I proud of myself? I am. My people, I'm very proud of myself. I am very proud of myself. Why? Because, people did not expect much from me. Growing up in Little Burgundy, being raised by a Black single mother, they're not paying the teachers enough. My mother is a teacher, was a teacher, will die a teacher, and they're not paying teachers enough. And with her salary, she was raising three people by herself. And her contributions in my life, my mother was not perfect. You don't need to be perfect, to be a mother that pours beautifulness into people. You don't need to be perfect. She poured what she had to pour in me, and it created a magnificent professional. And I have to say, the mentors as well that I met along the way, the people who really believed in me, who supported me during hard times, professional hard times, the people who gave me insight when I needed it, the people who reminded me of important things, they were all, there to support me and to make sure that I did not believe the lies. They were there so that I could not, take in and internalize, the lies, because there's lots of lies that are being told to Black women who are professionals, who are doing amazing things. And if anything, this episode, obviously, I guess by now, by the 4th episode, that I have a dear love. I really have a profound love for Black women. And my podcast is very, 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 very careful in terms of what I say, because I know the experience of a lot of Black women. We need that softness, and we need that consideration, and we need that because we're being disempowered in the workplace. People are trying to disempower us all the time, most of the time. We ourselves, need to understand the value of what we have to bring, and we mostly have to stay in spaces where that value is being recognized, seen, and understood. And I have to say, even though the statistics are real when it comes to Black women in the workforce, and the fact that they're not moving at the same pace as cis men or cis white women, they're not moving at the same pace. They're not capable of negotiating, salaries in the same way, because Black women are not received the same way. If you look at the statistics, that's what it talks about, how Black women are being received, how many dollars, are put on the value of their work. And I have to say that even though I know the statistics of that, I have to say that I had the opportunity to work with beautiful teams, like with people who understand, who really, 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 really understand positive leadership, who understand prevention, who understand engaging with humans, people who understand how to treat people. And I have to say, to the Black women who are listening to this episode, that there's not many teams out there who, will embrace you for you, fully you, not just you, your degrees and what you look like, whatever, whatnot, you as a human being. There's not many teams, but I have to say that I have bumped into a few teams that, they knew what they were doing. They like, truly, but there's not many though. In my experience, there's much that has to be done so that the culture within the institutions can be safer for Black women. We have much work to do. But one thing that never lied to me as a professional and as a woman is my intuition. And so I will smoothly end on that note and tell you that, my intuition as a professional in different spaces has never, ever misguided me. When I felt like something was wrong, in my hearts of hearts, it's usually because it was wrong. And I will invite us, I would invite us to listen to that voice, to be very aware of how we feel in certain spaces, and to not gaslight our own selves when it comes to how we feel in certain spaces. And the work is worthy, is important. The work is important. I believe the work is important. But labor, as Black people, we know labor. We have a really, interesting relationship with labor. Labor can be done in so many, many, many spaces. Work can be done in many, 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 many spaces. And there's much as Black women that we have to lose when we stay in spaces that are not respecting us. And I know that moving from an institution to another is not something that is easy because there's, all types of restrictions that we have, financial restrictions, and we have responsibilities and stuff like that. But what I can say for sure is that there's no institution out there that is worth your mental health. I will repeat it. I've said it many times in many spaces. There's no institution, no matter how noble the mission is, no matter how much you believe in the mission of that institution, there is no institution that is worth your mental health. That's what I learned. That's what I learned, and sometimes the hard way. I learned that some of the lessons I had to learn the hard way. But what I know for sure, because in 2009, when I started as an educator in the nonprofit world, and a few years later, creating my business, and then going to university, here in Quebec, and then abroad, and then doing all of these things, doing what I learned about success. It's truly what it feels like. Success is not what things look like. It's what it feels like. And for me, success, I will say it again and I will repeat it, my dear Black women out there, it's about the freedom you have to think and to move and to flow the way that works for you. And so I hope you find that sweet place, because I found it for sure. For sure, I found it. And I have to tell you that it takes time before you find that sweet place. But once you do, you will never be able to work in spaces or with people who are not honoring you, your energy, and what you have to bring. You'll never be able to do that again, ever again. And so, my dear people, I have to say thank you. I thank you for listening to this 4th episode. This is the end. This is the end. This is the end. I cannot tell you enough, thank you for listening to my podcast and for believing in this podcast, because this podcast started as a small idea in my head. And, my mother always told me, that I talk a lot. And I always tell my mother, well, you talk a lot. And so, here's your answer, mother. So at the end, this podcast is allowing me to be in conversation with communities all around the world, because as I'm looking at the data, on the online platforms regarding Ayeeyo Podcast, this podcast, some people in Europe and on the African continent are listening to that podcast, and you don't know how happy that makes me feel. I'm very happy. I'm very, very grateful that people are even giving this podcast a try. I hope this community will be growing and growing and growing. And I hope that you're appreciating it. And if you do appreciate this podcast, I really on social media, make sure you share it. Make sure you tag it. Make sure, people know about it, because if it's bringing you joy, why not share it, right? With other people. Share it with other people. I curate this podcast with lots of love, lots of care, and lots of honesty. And at the end of the day, what matters to me, and you'll sense it, is the emotions around what we do, And for me, emotions are very important in order to honor everything that we do professionally, personally, doesn't matter. The energy of that is very important. And so what I can tell you regarding the next episode is that on the next episode, there's going to be two Black women that I will be engaging with in conversation. And I just cannot wait. I just cannot wait for you to listen to that episode. It's going to be in French. And it's a great episode. You're going to love it. I know you're going to love it. So that is it for me. Less than an hour. I did it in less than an hour. I am so proud of myself. I am proud. You did good. You did good today. You did good today. So that said, kisses and take good care. And I guess I'll see you on the next episode. Take care. Bye.